Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg.
I'm Joel.
You get a double dose of Joel this week because we have done our 10K celebration video where Joel made everybody a cake, but only I got to eat it. Sorry.
It was really good though.
It was a really good cake. I'll have that video linked down below if you haven't seen it yet. And now we are here to wrap up the month of July.
Yeah, a little late, but we're here.
A little late, but we're here. That's all that matters. And we are both wearing Pride shirts. I'm wearing I stand with the band, I think is what it says on the bottom. I'm not going to stand up because I'm tired today. Yeah. And you have Protect Trans Kids because it was supposed to be Pride in Helena this weekend.
Well, it is Pride in Helena.
It is Pride in Helena.
But we did not go.
We did not go. Wanted to hang with Jamie, make sure she's doing well. Then that's what matters. Yep. We are going to have some books in common this month. How was your reading month, by the way?
I actually had a really good month. I liked what I read, and thanks to you. And
thanks to me.
So, yeah, I think when I looked at it, I had 8 books, and like 4 of them were 5 stars, and a 4-star, and a 3-star, and unfortunately a 2-star.
Well, I did push 2 books in his direction, and actually in our your stepmother, my mother-in-law's direction as well. So I am a book pusher. And I liked those books, so
yeah, we'll get to them. They're amazing books. I can't wait to talk about them.
So we'll get to them. I also had a surprisingly good, because I had a little bit of a dip when Jamie wasn't feeling well that about a week ago. Yeah. But I managed to finish 11 books. Wow. So yeah, I matched June, and June was my best reading month of the year so far. So that was pretty good.
And I think with 8 books, I'm like 5 books ahead of my reading goal. So I'm pretty happy with that.
I always set my reading goal to be very achievable. I set it at 70 books, and I think, including the book I finished in August, I'm at 66. So I have 4 books, and then I'll have hit my... But I intentionally set it as an achievable thing. So, well, should we get started?
Let's jump into this. Let's dive into it.
This is going to be funny. Let's discover, because the first books were things we did together. It's Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe, and Aristotle and Dante dive into the waters of the world, both by Benjamin Alire Sáenz, which I learned listening to the audio. I've always said his last name Sáenz, but it's Sáenz.
Sáenz? Oh,
yeah,
okay, cool.
That's how Lin-Manuel Miranda says it.
Let's not argue.
I'm not going to argue with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So, why did we do these?
We did these, we started on July 1st when we headed up to Canada for our 10th anniversary. So we did
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
So we did 1 book on the way up and 1 book on the way back. Mm-hmm. They were timed perfectly.
They really were. We finished Aristotle and Dante dive into the waters of the world as we were driving into Missoula.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
And I think we both agree these are some of our favorite books.
Yeah, I love both
of them. And it was fun to... Greg read the first one a long time ago.
When it was first published.
And then we read the second one when it came out.
Yeah.
So he wanted to review the first one. I go, well, let's just do them both on the way up. So we did it, and it was a lot of fun.
And actually, I think it was really nice to do them back to back, because I had originally wanted to reread the first book before reading the, at the time, new book, and I didn't have time. And they actually pretty seamlessly transition one from the other, and they go together very seamlessly, and they feel like one long book, which is kind of cool. And I would never have appreciated that if we hadn't done them back to back.
And it technically is just one long story, so with a really good natural break between them.
Yeah, like it ends with Aristotle and Dante camping. That's not a spoiler. They're just camping, and then it's nighttime, and then Dive into the Waters of the World picks up morning, like the next morning they're camping. And so it is a very seamless transition. So if you are unfamiliar, these are set in the late 1980s, and they are about 2 boys named Aristotle and Dante. They meet, they become friends, and then one thing that I've gotten very lax about talking about what happens in the first book, because so much time has passed, and now the sequel really reveals what happens at the end. But I have a new appreciation for how much of that is a spoiler for the first book, because it happens right at the end. So I feel like I shouldn't talk about it anymore. Let's not. No. Discover the secrets of the universe for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. I do want to throw in there that I think in a couple of weeks, sometime in August, I want to say the 8th or the 14th, the movie comes out. Yeah. The movie's been out for quite a while, but they really haven't had anybody to pick it up to show it mainstream. Yeah. So it's won some awards in the circuit, but it's coming out mainstream in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope it comes to... If it doesn't come to Missoula, I really hope it starts to stream very quickly.
Yeah.
Like they find a streaming platform.
I think if it came to Missoula, it'd go to the Roxy.
Probably. And that's our independent movie theater. Yeah. So we did them on audio, and Lin-Manuel Miranda reads the audio of both, and he's absolutely fantastic. So I would recommend that, actually. But we have copies of the books themselves. So that was... For both of us, those were the first 2 books of July. So who wants to actually go first?
Why don't you go ahead? You have more than me.
Okay. So my next one is actually something that you read later in the month. So actually, we get to talk about the same book at the same time. It's The Bandit Queens.
Oh, yeah.
It's The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. So that was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and that is what kind of introduced me. Actually, no, I had seen it somewhere, thought it sounded fun, and then it was on the long list, and that really cemented, that's something I would like to read.
Didn't we see it on Libro?
Yeah, we saw it. That's where I first saw it, on Libro, when it was released. And then when it was on the Women's Prize long list, I knew I wanted to read it. It did not make the short list. It obviously did not win. But I got such a kick out of it, which is funny because it's a book that is really heavily about abuse and murder.
But it's also about womanhood coming together and overcoming some of these things. So it's a very strong female cast, which I like. So...
And there's a cute dog.
A very cute dog. His name is Bandit.
His name is Bandit. He is not the Bandit Queen.
No.
But he's Bandit. And so the premise is you have this woman who was in an abusive relationship with her husband. And because of the time, the place, there was nothing she could do about that. One day he disappears. And everyone assumes she murdered her husband. She didn't actually, but she sort of starts trading off of the rumor. Like, she doesn't confirm it, but she also doesn't deny it because she likes that it makes people leave her alone and it makes people a little bit afraid of her. So she has a lot of independence that is afforded to her because people think she's a murderer. And then another woman comes to her and says, hey, you murdered your abusive husband. I have an abusive husband. Why don't you help me get rid of my husband? And she's sort of stuck because she doesn't know if she should admit that she didn't murder her husband. And chaos ensues. And it's very funny for a book that has such heavy underpinnings. Funny. It is really fun. Like, I was actually laughing out loud at the end. Yeah. And you read it too, so what did you think?
I read it too, and by your recommendation, so I really liked it.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the message that it was getting across of these women just weren't going to take it laying down. They got up and they did something about it.
Yeah.
And there's some like backstabbing and blackmail, and there's funny things happening. There is a segment in there where some dogs were being abused, and so that's not a big spoiler, but it's a trigger.
Yeah.
And but once you get through that, it has a very happy outcome.
Yeah, this is a book that manages to touch on a lot of those things and not make them feel traumatic, which again is pretty astonishing given the content of the book. And it even deals with a little bit of religion and caste because it's set in India. Like, there's a woman who is of the untouchable caste, and she's actually managed, because she's an independent woman, to become very wealthy. Even more wealthy than some of the women who are of a higher caste and are supposed to be, because they're higher caste, be more worthy than her. And ultimately they go on a sort of journey where they're like, what are these arbitrary distinctions? Yeah. Are you a nice person? So
I liked it, the religious side of it. I liked that it kind of overcame because you have Hindus and Muslims.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Technically don't bond, but they bonded because of a common trait going on between them.
Yeah.
And there's a little kind of a romance in there between the two religions too, and it's just like they overlooked it. I thought it was a beautiful story.
I really did. I thought it was great. I actually, when I updated my top 10 list for the year, which we did after we did our top 10 of the year, I read this after that. It jumped in for me. I can't remember where, but it's in there.
I don't think it's top 10. I can't remember. But definitely 15.
I don't know if it'll be there at the end of the year because I think it's like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a very competitive slot. But so that was my next read, and I really enjoyed it. So I knew you would like it.
It was fun.
Go figure. I know the person I'm married to pretty well. So so I think when I first told you about it, you were a little reluctant, like, I don't know about that.
Well,
and I was like, you got to do it. So
well, the premise was a little like I didn't realize how funny it was going to be.
Yeah.
And how lighthearted, but how encouraging.
Yeah.
That's what I enjoyed was the encouragement of these women.
For sure. And I think once I had the authority, like had read it, and knew for sure, like, oh, this is actually really funny and enjoyable. And I can say that from experience. I think that helped. I think so. Yeah. So that was my next book, and it ended up being, I don't know where on the list of things you read in the month it was, but that was my next one.
So down the ways a little bit. So when I get to it, I'll just like, there it is.
We did it.
So my next, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, my next book was Chef's Choice by T.J. Alexander. It was in a series called Chef's Kiss. I did Chef's Kiss, I think, a year ago. And this was Chef's Choice. It was a pretty unusual premise. It was this transgender man needed to find a girlfriend, so he grabbed the first person next to him, which was a transgender woman. And he had to do a cooking, not a competition, but he had to cook for his inheritance because his grandfather...
We should do that in our will.
Really? Yeah. His grandfather and his mother were both famous chefs. So he had to cook this elaborate dinner. I mean, like totally elaborate dinner. And neither one knew how to cook. So they had to learn how to cook.
Okay.
And to go do it. And it was really interesting reading how the transgender man was French and the transgender woman was American. And basically how they had very different lives and what enriched each of their lives. The man from France didn't have a social support. And he realized after hanging out with the woman that she had a social support and it enriched her life a lot. And she was really poor. She was getting $100,000 to do this competition with him.
Wow.
He had to pay her. So it was just this crazy, twisted, fun thing. And the outcome was really unique. It kind of reminded me of Me and You a little bit.
Okay. So when you were reading it, it sounded really cute. And now that you're saying that, I feel like I need to read it. Like,
and I don't want to spoil the ending, but it kind of reminded me of what you and I would do.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to read this book.
It was very cute. So I really liked it. It was fun.
Okay. I will have to check that out. I think I just read one sad book and I'm reading another sad book, so I will probably need something.
It's not sad.
Yeah, I need something not sad and sweet. So that'll probably do it for me. My next one was on a weird journey. So I got approved for an e-galley of Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward. And then, like a week after I read it, Joel won an Instagram contest for an advanced reader's copy of the book. So we didn't have a copy of the book, and now we actually do. But it doesn't have what the actual cover is going to look like. It has a quote.
But it's signed, isn't it?
From Jesmyn Ward. Well, it has a signature on it, but it's printed on there. So I have a whole review of this that I did. It is spoiler free. I'll link it down below so that will save us a little bit of time. We don't have to talk about it a lot. I've been a fan of Jesmyn Ward, I will say that. Salvage the Bones. And somebody commented when I was discussing this and asked about the dog fighting, because that is a huge aspect of Salvage the Bones. And I've always said it was a really difficult book, but I hadn't really thought about and processed that. I don't think I could read Salvage the Bones now, because when I read it, we lived in New York. I had never had a dog before. Now I've had two. And I think emotionally it would just really upset me, like that aspect of the story. So if that's a thing for you, I would say don't read Salvage the Bones. But it is a book that has haunted me ever since. I think the last sentence in particular has stayed with me. Sing Unburied Sing is a fantastic book. Also really difficult, but there's no dog abuse in it. So that would be a much better access point. And the difficulty with this book is that Jesmyn Ward has set a really high bar for herself, and I don't think she clears it. Like, to me, the other two are, I would say, especially Sing Unburied Sing, are better. However, it's a great book, and I would still recommend it. So if you are interested, you can pre-order it. It comes out in October 3rd is what it says on the spine. So I'll send you to the review video if you want more information about it. It's spoiler free. So there you go. What do you got?
My next one was, again, your recommendation. Only This Beautiful Moment by Abdi Nazemian.
Yeah.
And, we have it.
This one.
Yay.
Yeah. It's a pretty cover.
Greg talked about it last month, and it really kind of got me going. And what a freaking beautiful book. It was really beautiful.
Really good.
It was 3 generations of Iranian men and a grandfather, father, son. And they had lived anywhere between Iran and America, but then all of them had to be forced to move to another country for one reason or another. I found it to be really enlightening on another culture that I'm not familiar with, and just beautifully done.
Yeah. We were both huge fans of Like a Love Story, which was Abdi Nazemian's previous book. And I had been thinking for Pride Month, when I was creating my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, that I wanted to go back and read one of his earlier books. I think I had chosen the Chandler Legacies, which I think is coming. Spoiler alert.
Maybe spoiler.
Maybe. But then I found out that he had published another book, and I just, for whatever reason, I hadn't known that it was coming. So immediately I wanted to read this one, and I managed to squeeze it in. I think it was the last book I squeezed in the month of June, so I already covered it in our last one. But yeah, Joel read it in July. It's a fantastic book.
My mother read it, and my stepmother read it.
Yeah,
and she really, really liked it too.
I think she said it's her favorite of the year.
Yeah,
was that right?
I think it actually topped mine too.
It's a really good book. So absolutely would recommend it.
Abdi is a beautiful writer. And so we did Like a Love Story. We did this, and spoiler, I did another book of his. He's just a beautiful writer, and I like him a lot.
Yeah. I need to read the other one that you read that's coming. He's very good at complex characters and situations as well. Like, it really is a story about 3 generations. It moves back and forth in time, but it flows very seamlessly. It never feels difficult. You know, in some cases, like, you know why the father had to leave Iran to come to the United States, because the book pretty openly says that it's because of the Iranian Revolution. He was a college-age kid, wanted to protest, and his family sent him to the U.S. to be safe. You don't really know why the grandfather had to move from the United States to Iran. That's something that gets teased out. But it's also a really beautiful family story, and I kind of lost my place a little bit talking about the difficulty and how it moves back in time. But there's real thematic resonance, because the story of the grandfather and his life and who he is and how he is forced to leave ties in with his son's story and how he is living and protesting and is forced to leave. And then it ties in with his grandson's story about who he is. And he's not necessarily forced to leave. He goes to Iran because the grandfather's dying. That's not a spoiler. You know that on page 1. But there's thematic resonance throughout the book. But also, it's a great family story because they are very disconnected in the beginning, and then over time, they open up to each other, and it's really beautiful. So.
Especially the father and the son, which basically the son and the grandson, the 2 younger generations, they had a very closed relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, did not communicate.
Yeah.
And at the part where they open up to each other is incredibly beautiful.
And I would say also the son with the grandfather, or the father with the grandfather.
Yes, because then you learn why the father's so closed.
Yeah, and because he's closed, he is also closed to his father, who is the grandfather. Yeah. So yeah,
and I think it makes the grandson kind of realize more about his life growing up and why things were the way they were.
Yeah,
that it changes him too.
Yeah, it's really good,
phenomenal,
very, very, very good. So. All right, where are we? I just did Let Us Descend. So my next one was Good Women, Stories by Halle Hill. This was something that I included on my most anticipated books for the rest of 2023. And I did something for 2 books that I don't usually do. I actually reached out to the publisher and requested a review copy, and they sent it to me, and I read it, and it's really good. I would say if you are a fan of Luster by Raven Leilani, this is a good collection for you, or Real Life by Brandon Taylor, this is a really great story collection for you. What really hooked me is that Disha Filia, author of My Beloved, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, had given a blurb to this book, and they do kind of compare it to that. And I'd say there's a stronger comparison to Luster and Real Life, but there are elements of the Secret Lives of Church Ladies in here. So hopefully that's hooked you in. It's also a small little thing. You could dunk it in your coffee. Yeah. And I definitely worth your time. It is going to be published on September 12th. So if it sounds interesting to you, I would recommend that you pre-order it. It's coming up a month away.
Sweet.
But yeah, it's just short stories about Black women. And it is sort of darkly funny, and they're very interesting. So that was my next read, and I would recommend it to you. It comes from a small publisher, Hub City, and I had sort of intentionally wanted to check out their catalog because I think they published The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles.
Good book, too.
Also a very good book. And this did not disappoint. So there you go. That's my next one.
Is that the one with the Speedo story?
No, that one's still to come.
Okay.
Speedo story coming up.
Sorry.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. No, please.
Are you done?
Yes,
Sweet.
go ahead.
My next book is The Chandler Legacies by Abdi Nazemian. I just loved this beautiful moment, and I wanted to jump into something else of his. And it's like, I'm going to give it a try. And it did not disappoint me at all.
Yeah.
It was 5 students in a boarding school, and some are gay, some are not, and just how things went. It did deal with a little bit of emotional abuse and bullying, and
I think you hit a point where it was a little emotionally difficult, but you pushed through it. So
I did. A lot of triggers in there, and I really found the characters to be amazing and lovely, and I just got really vested in all of them. And a fun book. And it's a little bit like these 5 students are in a writing club, and something's going on with the writing club they have to. So it's a little bit like, I would say, a cross of The Breakfast Club, the 90s. 80s Brat Pack.
Yeah.
So a little Breakfast Club, but really well done. So
yeah,
I liked it.
And I do need to catch up to that one. I think he has at least one other book that had been previously published, so we'll have to catch up to that one as well. And then we'll be stuck waiting for his next book.
So yeah, that was it. It was good.
That was your next one? Yeah. All right, then we started watching Last Call, a true story of love, lust, and murder in queer New York. And that is on Max if you are in the United States. And watching it, there are 4 episodes, made me really curious to go back to the book, which I had already read, and you had already read as well. And I think having done both again, I could confidently say I think the series is actually better. It does talk about the murders as if they were sort of impossible to ignore if you were part of the queer community. I don't know that that's 100% true, but I think, but part of that is also that the media was not really paying close attention to it because these murders were happening within the gay community, and because of that, police in New York City were not really invested in investigating it properly, and the media also kind of ignored it. So the show really picks up the element of the gay community trying to push back and say, hey, people are getting murdered, you really need to figure this out. And of course there are difficulties with jurisdiction because they still actually to this day don't know where the crime scene is, but body parts were left in different states around New York City. So it's true crime, it's difficult. But what I really love is that it also focuses much more on the victims and their lives and what their lives say about the queer community at the time these crimes were happening. 2 of them were closeted men who were married to another woman. One of them was a sex worker. One of them was an out gay man who was living his life. And it's very emotional to hear their stories. And actually, I think that's also one thing that the show does really well. Like, I cried in the 3rd episode because it was just hearing their stories and about their lives. And also the show really picks up on the trauma that is still existing on the families of these people who were murdered. Like the sex worker has a nephew, a great nephew, I think. Great nephew, who is gay and had to reckon with the fact that no one wanted to talk about his uncle being gay. Like they just, still his father will not refer to, he will accept that he was a sex worker, but refuses to admit that he's gay. The daughter of one of the men who had been married struggles with the fact that she never got to know her father as a gay man, and never really got to know who he actually was. The sister of the out gay man, God,
I loved her. And
so
she was a lesbian too.
Yeah, and I think she was out at the time of his murder. Yeah. but it really focuses on that sort of ripple effect of trauma. And the book it's good. I would really recommend the show.
I think the show covered everything the book had, but the show went more deep into the family and the trauma of the family. Yeah. And they actually had the actual people and the actual people who are helping fight the crime. Yeah. So I liked hearing their point of view, which is put in the book, but not verbatim from their mouth. Yeah. And that was really the one woman who was with the task force. She was just this really cool woman.
Yeah, I think both of the people from the task force against violence, because there's a man and a woman, and both of them are really fascinating and have very interesting perspectives. Not just these crimes, but on crimes in general, because there had been a huge upswing in hate crimes and murders. One, because of visibility, but also because of people were afraid of HIV and AIDS. And it's terrible stories that are really important. So, yeah. And Charlize Theron was a producer of the TV show.
She was,
yeah. Or executive producer. So
I think when we read the book, we read this and we read the 5 about the Jack the Ripper victims.
Yeah.
And so we were doing books on the victims that didn't really show the killer that much.
Yeah.
And because we all know who the killer was, but we wanted to know who the victims were. And that's what I liked about these 2 books.
Yeah. And this one, because the killer is not Jack the Ripper and is not as known and there's not as much media about him, it does talk about who he is, what his life was like at the end. And the last episode of the series does deal with the killer as well. But it's, especially in the show, it's still framing it through the story of the victims.
Right.
So it's just, to me, it's a good way of doing a true crime. So that was my next book.
My next one was one we just talked about earlier, The Bandit Queen. And we've talked about it, but again, it's a great book. I recommend it.
Yeah, it's very good. I would definitely recommend that to you. All right, so you want me to go? All right, so my next one was Dearborn by Ghassan Zeineddine. This is the one that has a story about a man in a Speedo. Is it the first story? I don't think it is. It's not the first story. It's the second story.
Yeah.
But so these are stories that, as you can tell from the title, are all set in or around Dearborn, Michigan. And what's really funny about this is we had just watched season 2 of Taste the Nation, hosted and created by Padma Lakshmi. And if you're unfamiliar with the concept of that show, she goes around the country to talk about what it is to be American and what American cuisine exactly is by looking at food politics and people in the area. And I would recommend it. It's a great, fascinating show. And one episode in the second season, she goes to Puerto Rico and talks about the sort of colonial impact of America, and it's interesting. But she goes to Dearborn, Michigan, because there is this Middle Eastern community there, and she talks about how they got there. The book doesn't get into how this Middle Eastern community ended up there, but anyway, we had just learned about this community, and that is the focus of this story collection. I really enjoyed this. So you have a wide range of characters, wide range of well, it's mostly the same religion, but what I mean is how seriously they take their religion. There are perspectives of men, perspectives of women, sometimes in the same story. Like this, so the Speedo story is real. It has a great sense of humor, by the way. You have husbands and wives who are going to a pool in an athletic club, and one day this man who is really physically built, well endowed, shows up, throws off his robe, and he's wearing this Speedo that has images of Lebanon, where he and most of the people at the pool are from. And it sort of goes back and forth with the reactions of the women, talking about how in shape he is, and then you just go to the men who are kind of like, he can't really pull off that Speedo. But it's really funny. And you also have the perspective of someone who is not transgender, but is playing around with gender, and I don't think they've realized exactly what that means for them. It's just, I really loved this a lot. This was another one of my most anticipated books for the second part of the year, and I also had reached out to the publisher, which is Tin House, asking for a review copy, which is not something I usually do, but then emboldened by these 2 experiences, I did reach out to a third publisher and was approved for another one, so stay tuned for that. But Tin House is another smaller independent publisher that I was watching because they did Night of the Living Res by Morgan Talty, which
great book.
Yeah, I loved it last year. And this really did not disappoint. I absolutely loved this book. So I know short stories are a bit of a tough sell for people, and I've talked about 2 of them now. And this one, they're not really linked stories, which I think gives people a better access point to a story collection. But these feel more cohesive because there are, like in one story, someone will reference the business that they own, and then the business will come back in another story, or someone will reference, the first story is about an actor, and then later on someone will reference, oh, that guy who's an actor. So the characters and businesses do reverberate throughout the collection, but they're not strictly linked stories. But this comes out September 5th, I believe. Yeah, September 5th. I would absolutely recommend it. It's fantastic. So, what do you have?
My next one, we did this one together.
Oh, we did this one together.
We went to Pullman, Washington for Jamie's follow-up. We did Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Yes.
Beautiful book by Casey McQuiston.
McQuiston.
It was fun. It was a son of a female U.S. president and the son of the Queen of England.
So what's fun, if I might jump in, is that if you are of a political persuasion that aligns with us, the history of presidents is the same as ours up to 2016. And then instead of what happened in the real world, you get the first female president, who's this, she was a senator from Texas, or was she a governor? She's from Texas.
I think she was a governor.
Okay. And she's from Texas, and like, then wouldn't this have been so much better than what we got? Anyway, go ahead.
No, we both read it, so we can both talk.
Yeah.
Fun book. When the two meet, they did not like each other, and actually, we just watched the movie's coming out.
The movie's
next
coming.
week.
Yeah, we watched the trailer.
Yeah, we watched the trailer. But there's a big scene of where they are kind of fighting and doing this with each other, and they knock over the wedding cake, and the wedding cake falls on them.
Yeah.
And that's like an embarrassment to both countries, and the president says, you two need to get along.
Yeah.
So they were forced to spend time together, and then they started talking and found out why they don't like each other. And actually a really fun book, just lots of crazy things going on.
It's cute. It is, I would say, just a little too long. Like, I think there are some areas where it spends, I mentioned this in my Friday reads, it spends a lot of time talking about, the son of the president, Alex, wants to get into politics. So he starts working on his mother's campaign for re-election. And it goes really in depth on a lot of the things that he's working on, which is kind of interesting if you want behind the scenes stuff into politics, but ultimately it doesn't mean anything for the story. So I feel like that could have been trimmed a little bit just to make it move a little more.
They did. They talked about a certain thing, but never bring it up again.
Yeah.
It's like, what's so important about that thing?
Yeah, because like he's looking into gerrymandering in Texas and trying to think how to fix it, and then he never brings it up again. But you spend a lot of time talking about it. So not a lot of time. I'm overstating.
Yeah, fun book. But your sister gave us this, so great book. So thank you, Allie.
I mentioned in the Friday reads, she lives in New York, so she has very limited space for books. So if she reads a book, unless it's like one of her like all-time favorites, she's not going to keep it. So she thinks about someone who might enjoy it and sends it to them. So she sent us this one. So thank you, Allison.
Good book.
It is funny though. She called me while she was reading it because of the way the sex is depicted in the book, and she's like, "Is this offensive? I don't want to get into it right now." And I was like, "No, it's just the way gay romance books work." So that was kind of funny. All right, is it me?
Yep.
Yeah.
You.
So my next one was Dear Committee Members by Julie Schumacher, which I got from the library. It was a very short book. It had been recommended by the New York Times Book Review podcast because there is a third installment of it coming out. It's an epistolary novel, and I didn't realize 2 of my last books are epistolary novels, so that's kind of fun. It's about a professor who's working at a university where the English department is shrinking and there are budget cuts, and the entire novel is framed in letters that he is sending. A lot of them are recommendation letters that he's sending on the behalf of students. And then the story is sort of teased out from there. I will say, I think, like the person from the New York Times who recommended it, if you are involved or obsessed or anything with academia, you'll probably like this book more than someone who is not. Like, I was in academia a little bit as a student and then kind of decided I don't want to be this competitive. my whole life, so this is not for me. So it's interesting, but I think if you have that access point, it would be a little bit better. There is a very surprisingly hefty emotional ending to the book, but by and large, most of it kind of feels like, okay, this is clever, but is it actually going to stay with me over time? Probably not. But I am going to read the second book, so that's something, because it was pleasant enough. Anyway, there we go. That was my next one. Do you have any others?
I have one more.
Okay.
So my just nighttime reads, I did Rick's Bear by M. Tasia, which was one of my male-on-male romance.
Yeah.
So Rick is a very shy, and he was physically and emotionally abused by an ex-boyfriend, and so he really kept to himself, and he's just a little tiny little guy. Well, a big biker from Detroit, actually another one from I think Chicago.
We've got a theme.
Moved into town, and he was just like 6'6", big biker who just got out of a motorcycle gang. And there were a lot of the books part of the books I didn't like because I felt like the biker was coming on too strong, but the biker was just trying to let Rick know he's safe with him, and I'm not going to let anybody hurt you. But every time they get together, there's a big fight somewhere, and a lot of things going on.
It's a little weird to come on aggressively to prove to someone that you're safe.
It was a little, it was a little aggressive, but when you get into it, Rick had a lot of scars from his abuse, and Rick's Bear had a lot of scars from knife fights, a gunshot wound, being wrecked on a motorcycle.
Is this the one you had where you said they kept comparing scars?
And they were comparing scars.
And I was like Jaws. So.
It was. Yeah. But just to let him know, it's like, we all have scars. And that's where the good part of the book came out, is saying we all have scars and we all have to work through things.
I like that.
And it was good. It was a little over the top, but it was good. But overall, it was an okay book. It dealt with a lot of things, but it was fun. Yeah,
that sounds interesting. Yeah. I think I would probably go with the chef one if I were going to read one.
Chef one's better, yeah.
But that sounds not...
Well, this was a little short thing, and I could just read a few chapters a night.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I usually read a few chapters a night to relax me. This book stressed me out a little bit.
That's not good. So, yeah, that's not good at all. So,
and that's my read for the month.
All right. I have two more, but I can be very quick with both of them, because one of them I really can't talk much about without spoiling. So the first one is Stone Fruit by Lili. That's not the one that I could talk about cannot talk about without spoiling. It's a graphic novel. I already returned it to the library along with Dear Committee members. It is about, you have this lesbian couple at the center. They help watch, one of them has a niece, and they help watch her. And there's a lot of tension because both of the women in this lesbian relationship are struggling with depression. One of them had a very religious conservative family who has had problems with her, and she's struggling to overcome all of the stuff, the emotional baggage that comes from that. And they're trying to figure out ways to live together and reconcile the baggage that they both have in order to be in a healthy relationship. The mother of the niece, so the sister of one of the lesbians, there's tension between the sisters, and it's sort of being exacerbated by the fact that she gets to be the fun person in the child's life. And of course, if you're a parent and you always have to play bad cop, she's a single mom, so she always has to be bad guy, she feels. And it's just creating a little bit of tension between the sisters. And she kind of resents the fact that the lesbian partner, who she doesn't really like or trust, is always around her daughter, and her daughter likes her. So there's a lot going on there. It was a really interesting book, very quick read. I read it on, I think last Sunday for like an hour, and it was done. And so it was good. Then I listened to an audio that was only an hour long, and it included a forward and an afterward. So the book itself is only like 35, maybe 40 minutes at most. It's Address Unknown by Kathrine Kressmann Taylor, and this is the one I really can't talk about in depth because I feel like it would ruin everything. But I immediately told you and my mother-in-law, your stepmother, about it, and she listened to it as well. And when she finished it, she just texted me and said, wow. That's all she said. Because you haven't read it yet, so we can't
Yeah.
talk about it. The premise is, I can tell you that much. It was published in, I want to say 1939 in the United States. It was published in a magazine, and then it was printed as a book. And it deals with World War II and kind of reveals the lie that people in this country didn't know what was going on in Germany. That's all I can say about that. But it's an epistolary novel. It takes the form of letters between two men who were friends and business partners in San Francisco. One of them has moved back to Germany, and they are sending each other letters back and forth. And that's where, because it's such a short book, I cannot talk about the letters, because if I talk about the letters and what happens, I'm going to ruin, because it's a sucker punch of a book. I would recommend it. So that was my reading month. Let's really quickly talk about August, because you have a very interesting challenge that you have set for yourself in the month of August, and I think it's adorable and interesting.
So, which your book I may actually read because it will tie into some of my books.
Okay.
I am doing books on elephants.
Joel loves elephants. I don't know if you know this.
I do. I'm so fascinated by them, of just how they're probably smarter than humans, and just how intelligent they are.
They're sassy.
And they're crazy, they're funny, they're sassy. One of the hardest things for us is I always felt Guinness and a baby elephant would be the best playmates ever.
If you picture how a baby elephant plays and all the little sassy gifs you can find of them, that was Guinness as well. So we always so we always used to joke that we needed to get to an elephant sanctuary so Guinness could play with the baby elephant and Jamie could climb on the back of a full-grown elephant and bark at a giraffe. That was our dream. That was our dream.
So I'm reading books on elephants, and I'm already 2 books down.
Yeah.
And I'm actually proud to say they're not audiobooks. So they're actually ebooks. I do more ebooks. I'm just 2 fascinating reads, and they have been incredible, beautiful stories involving elephants.
Yeah.
I'll leave it for that until next month. And one is in World War One. Another one I'm doing is World War II. So that's why I may read your book to kind of understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
So,
and actually, I know one of the ones that you just finished, we have sent to my mother-in-law, his stepmother, and I think she's going to read. We should get her on sometime, because we do have this semi-book club going on with her. I don't know how we would ever get her on, because she lives in Helena. But we do have this semi-book club going on where if she reads something that she likes or finds interesting, she'll send it to us. If we read something that's interesting and we like, we'll send it to her. Like, she's going to read Bandit Queens. She hasn't yet. She loved Only This Beautiful Moment.
She did. She really loved this book.
So
everybody should read those.
She's in the group. She just hasn't been in a video. So we'll have to try to figure out how to do that. So
maybe like year-end wrap-up, since we've done a lot of the same books.
Oh yeah, that would be really interesting. Yeah. So we'll have to figure out a way to make that happen. I don't have any special plans for August. August is Women in Translation Month, and I was just telling you this morning that I had been thinking, with everything going on in our lives, I wasn't going to do it, but that there is a book that I have on my shelf. I won't spoil it. I won't say what it is. So you'll have to wait until Friday reads, because I think I'm going to finish what I'm reading right now and maybe do that very quickly. But I finished one book, and I am reading another book by the same author. And I'm going to be coy about that. But yeah, so that I'm just going to kind of freewheel my way through the month of August and go from there. Anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
We've covered it all?
Covered it all.
Yeah, look at us.
Can't wait for next month.
Can't wait. It's been good so far.
I've been very emotional.
This is what I know he loves elephants. I get so stressed out watching elephant documentaries, reading about elephants, because there's always, even if nothing happens, there's always a stressful point where you think something could happen, and I get so upset. So I can't do it, but good for you. Anyway, that's July. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
We got a double dose of Joel this week, and looking forward to August. As always, we really appreciate your time, and we will be back. Until next time, happy reading.
Bye.